All right, true confessions time. How many of you have ever used one of those excuses to buy something you kind of didn't really need until you saw it, of course? Yep. Well, hey, welcome. My name is John, and welcome to Terra Nova. So we're kicking off this brand new series. It's January. It's a new year, and I got to tell you, personally, I love this time of year. I love January. I love a new year because a new year, I feel like, personally, affords us the opportunity to do a couple of things that are really, really good. On the one hand, to look back and assess what has been the past year, the past few years perhaps, the good and bad, and learn from that, and then to look forward to the next year, make some course corrections, some adjustments. I don't know if anybody's been doing that, thinking through that, to grow in some way. And January is isn't this true? January is a great get back on track month. Isn't that true? It's like, I need to get back on track maybe after the holidays or the past year or the past just few years. Like, there are some things I just need to get back on track. And that's a great thing. And as we do that, isn't it really true that moving from an old year to a new year, there are things that we want to carry with us from year to year to year. I mean, they're just good to have from one year to the next, good habits, good rhythms and routines, good relationships, good friendships from one year to the next. And then there are things that are not good to carry from one year to the next, that we need to be in the habit of recognizing and leaving behind. And this is a series about one of those things. One of the things that all of us should be in the habit of recognizing as soon as we see it and dropping it like it's hot, and that is our excuses. Excuses are like paper walls. They look real from a distance. They look like actual barriers or actual obstacles. From a distance, they seem impenetrable. I don't have a choice. I have no other option than to keep doing what I've always been doing or never do what I have not been doing. I really have no option than to stay in the same situation, the same rut, the same rhythm, the same habit. Like, it's a wall, like it's impenetrable. You can't get through that. You don't understand. I can't change it. It's not so easy, right? And from a distance, our excuses really start to look like reasons, like actual reasons. Now, there is an actual reason why I cannot dunk a basketball or throw a 100-mile-an-hour fastball or run a 440 mile. There are actual reasons for certain things, but there is no real reason why I cannot forgive. There is no actual reason why I must stay stuck in this attitude or this way of thinking or this way of being. And there are things that aren't so great in my life and in your life. There are things that in our lives that really aren't best. And some of those things, quite honestly, have been that way for a while. It's been that way for a while now. And if you don't know what some of those are, the people sitting next to you would probably be happy to help enlighten. But chances are you actually know what some of those things are already. You already kind of know. Like, yeah, I'm kind of grumpy and negative and just kind of in a bad mood all the time. I don't respond to other people's joy and cheerfulness very well. I'm a little bit of like, people say that to me. I let people walk all over me. I do. I know it. I always have to fix everybody else's problems. I have boundary issues. I don't really let people inside. I don't trust people very easily. I push people away. I withdraw from people a lot. I hold on to things. I do not let things go. I hold on to the memory of that. I hold on to bitterness. I hold on to resentment. I hold on to that grudge. I don't really forgive very well. I've got impulse control issues, okay? So it's like I want, and I just so I overdo a lot of things. I overspend, I overdrink, I overeat. My temper, I can't say no to me in the moment. I have an impulse and I just go for, there are things about you and there are things about me. And we have reasons, right? Like, I have my reasons for the way I am, the things I do and the things I don't do, and you have your reasons as well. But if you were to press beyond those reasons, you'll find that often they're not very good reasons. They're just excuses that get passed off as reasons and become our becauses. Becauses that we habitually hide behind and eventually begin to believe. Why don't you ever do that? Well, because why haven't you? Well, see, it's because, why do you always? Why are you always? Well, because, why do you keep on doing that? Because, why don't you start? Why don't you finish? Why don't you stop? Why do you stay? Why do you stay? Well, because she, well, because he. Why do you leave? Why do you always seem to leave? Why don't you just tell her? Why don't you just tell him? Why can't you just say something and be honest? Well, because, why don't you forgive him? Because why can't you let that go? Because you don't understand, and I can't just, and it wouldn't, and it doesn't matter, and it's because, and if it's like, of course, I get it. You have reasons. Of course you have reasons. But are your reasons actual reasons, or are they excuses that are masquerading as reasons that eventually became your becauses that you have started to believe and want me to believe and want the rest of us to believe as well? As we're going to talk about over the next few weeks, there is a fine line between a reason and an excuse. And the one is always trying to pass itself off as the other. And the way we see through and react to other people's excuses really just highlights this. I mean, it just makes it so obvious, because when we see other people doing this, we say things like, you're just making excuses. You're making. Like you're fabricating that. You act like there's an actual reason why you cannot possibly, but you're making that up and you're telling yourself a story and treating it like it's an impenetrable wall. Like there's no way I could ever, and no one could ever expect me to, because the laws of physics prohibit. It's like, no. Quit making excuses. Quit making, that's what we say, right? And the idea is, you're making stuff up. You're creating a paper wall inside your mind, trying to pass that off as an actual barrier, an actual obstacle, an actual reason, and trying to convince yourself and maybe trying to convince the rest of us that it's real. You're dressing up an excuse and you're passing it off as a reason. Now, you see people do this all the time, and you see through this when other people do it all the time, right? So parents, you see your kids do this, and you see right through it immediately. It's like, well, I can't, and you don't understand, Mom, and well, she said, and well, he did it first, and it was hard, and I couldn't, and I woke up late, and I didn't have time, and nobody else was, and we're like, come on, you're making excuses, honey. Stop making excuses, right? We just see through that so quickly. It is so easy to see this in your coworkers or your employees. I got sick because I thought the cat food was tuna. It's like, come on. That's like, so I had a tummy ache. They're just making excuses. Or some of us, how many of you have ever had a boss or a manager who like called you in and they're the team's together and they're telling you about something that happened and here's the reason why, and you're just sitting back there going, oh, good grief. You're making excuses. Anybody ever have that at their place of business? And your spouse, I mean, come on, how easy. How many of you have a spouse who's, don't raise your hands. How many of you have a spouse that's hiding behind an excuse and treating it like an actual reason? Yeah, I mean, like we see this through others. So it is so easy to see in other people that some of you are thinking of somebody who you really wish were here right now. In fact, some of you are sitting next to that person and you hope they're hearing what you're hearing. Is because like, yes, I see this. We can spot this a mile away in others, and we can't see it 6 inches away in the mirror. And so we say things like, the reason is, here's what we never say. We never say, my excuse is, that's interesting you bring that up again. See, my excuse is, we never say that. In fact, the words don't even form very easily in the mouth, do they? And so I thought maybe we should say this. Maybe we should say this a lot more often, and maybe we should practice it. Okay, so I want us to practice saying that out loud together. I'm going to say, I want you to repeat after me. My excuse is... my excuse is. Now, all together, 1, 2, 3. My excuse is. Now, let's role play with this a little bit. I'm going to ask you a question. It's going to have a little bit of an edge to it. And your answer is going to be, let me hear it. Okay, you ready? All together? Why do you always do that? My excuse Why don't you tell him the truth? Why can't you forgive her? My excuse. Wow, refreshing, right? Refreshing, honest, kind of liberating. Actually, it's empowering is what it is. So I want to ask, as we're kicking off this new year, kicking off this series, is it possible, or even willing, probably not you, but are you willing to consider the possibility that some of your reasons and becauses are actually just paper walls? Paper walls, excuses that you've created and even believed that are fueled by who knows what? Fear, insecurity, ego, self-esteem, past events, filled by perhaps something that someone told you, because something someone told you or something someone called you, or perhaps labeled you or even expected of you and you couldn't or felt like you didn't come through and now you are through. Or perhaps actually it's something that you have told yourself or called yourself, or labeled yourself, or expected of yourself. Is it possible that you have invented reasons to defend certain behaviors, certain habits, certain ruts that you have found in? Because certain attitudes and moods and things you carry around with you, certain reactions or overreactions. Why is it when he comes in the room, you are already just triggered? Why is it that whenever we're with them, you are just so on edge? Well, because. Is it possible that you have invented certain reasons to defend your procrastinating certain things? You just put it off. When are you going to go see the doctor? When are you going to get help with that? Well, I know. Is it possible you've invented reasons to defend certain things you're neglecting or simply avoiding certain things, certain people, certain kinds of people, certain opportunities, certain events? The reason is, no, you don't understand. The reason is, okay, my excuse is, the story I'm making up is, and we all do this, we all have our excuses, and what all of our excuses do, first of all, our excuses blame something internal on something external. This is how they're so disempowering, because they blame something that's inside me on things that are outside me. They blame things that I might have some responsibility for on things that I don't have any responsibility for. And so consequently, if the reason why what is messed up in me is because of something that's messed up outside of me, that I can't control or change or influence, well, then I really am stuck, aren't I? I actually am stuck. I can't really change. I can't really help it. The reason why I am the way I am, because of you. It's because of you. If you don't change, this will never change inside of me. The reason why I'm stuck feeling the way I feel, it's because of them. It's because of that. It's something outside of me. I'm not responsible for what's happening inside of me. It blames what's internal and what's external, and consequently, it boxes us in to our most broken behaviors. Our excuses box us in or wall us into our most broken attitudes, our most broken addictions, emotions, the feelings we carry with us, the mindset, the ways of thinking, the habits, the reactions. They box us into our most broken behaviors, the things that are really worst about us. And so nothing really changes. Year after year after year, we don't actually grow. We don't actually get better. In fact, we can't. We cannot grow beyond our own paper walls. And so I construct this wall. I construct these walls, and it feels like I'm protecting myself, and it feels like I'm protecting my image or my ego. It feels like I'm defending myself against something that's outside of me, but actually I'm boxing myself in, and I'm walling myself in and keeping myself out of some actual growth, some health, some maturity, some relationships, maybe some better relationships, better mental health, better physical health, better spiritual health, because of something I won't admit to myself and anybody else. Our excuses blame things that are internal or things that we might be partially responsible for on things that are outside of us. They box us in with what is really worst about us, and they blind us to what's really behind them. They blind us because there are actual reasons reasons. That thing you do that you always do that you keep doing and can't not do, there's a reason for that. There are reasons behind the things that we cannot seem to change, and they are usually not the reasons that we actually give, and our excuses blind us to the real reasons behind the things I do, which if we could see them and be honest about them, we might actually begin to address them and grow and change beyond them. So I started thinking about maybe some more honest answers to the, hey, why do you always do that? Or why can't you ever? Or why do you avoid? Why do you? And so here may be some more honest answers. And there's never just one reason for anything we do. So you might have like all of these going on. I probably do. Hey, great question. I think I've always just told myself that's just the way I am. Someone called me that, or I got labeled that perhaps, but I have just told myself, that's all I'll ever be. That's all I am. This is not for me. I'm just this way. Maybe that's honest. Here's one. I don't know. I don't actually think. Why do you always leave? Why do you always leave? I don't know. I used to think it was something external, but now I'm starting to think it's internal. And I don't know that I understand that in myself. Well, that's honest. Here's one. I don't know how. Why don't you forgive her? Well, I guess I don't really know how. I mean, I like to hold on to my anger. I feel so righteous and justified with it, and there's all these other things. But when it comes down to it, I'm not sure I know how to forgive someone for that. I don't know how. Well, that's empowering, right? Here's one, and this is maybe almost always part of the case, because I'm afraid. I'm afraid of change. I mean, I hate the way things are going for me now, but it scares me. The devil you know is always better than the devil you don't. It's like, I hate this, but what will that be? And it scares me. I'm afraid. I'm afraid of failure. I'm afraid of putting myself out there. I'm afraid of being seen. This excuse, this paper wall is one of the things I hide behind to deflect, and everybody can kind of see through it anyway. But if I drop that and it's just me, I've never been that way before. I'm afraid. I guess I'm kind of afraid. Maybe one of the most honest answers we could ever have is, don't want to. Don't want to. Why'd you do that? Wanted to. Why don't you do that? Don't want to. Like, I get a thing and that's just what I do. Why'd you buy that? Wanted it. Well, it was on sale and I spent some money and wanted it. When I had an impulse, couldn't say no. Why don't you do that? Don't want to. I can't seem to say no to me when I want to say yes, and I can't seem to say yes to me when me wants to say no, and so I just want to. Now, there are reasons behind that as well, but honestly, that's sometimes the answer. Don't want to. Don't want to enough to do what it would have to take to get to the other side of that paper wall. Is it possible that you have some of this? That you have some of this going on? Is it possible that you might be actually missing out on a better, healthier, more fully alive version of yourself? That you might be actually missing out on a better marriage, better than the one you have that you think can't get better? Is it possible you might be missing out on more joy, more grace, more love, more connection, more community, more intimacy, more fulfillment, more contribution, more growth? That you could actually be missing out on the life that you were created to live because of walls that you have built around yourself made of paper. Is it possible? Is it possible that some of your becauses are really just excuses? Now, you don't accept that in your kids. You don't put up with that for a second, right? You don't believe that or accept that when it's coming from your coworkers, your employees, or your boss. You don't believe that and accept it so easily from your spouse or from your mom or your dad. Why then believe it so easily and accept it so quickly from the person in the mirror? Is it possible that some of your becauses are really just excuses? Now, here's why we're talking about this in church. In fact, here's why we're talking about this in church for 4 whole weeks, because there is a correlation between your ability to follow Jesus. Not necessarily your willingness, like, oh no, I'm a follower of Jesus, but there is a correlation between your ability to actually follow Jesus and your willingness to push through your paper walls and acknowledge your becauses as excuses. There is a correlation between your ability to follow Jesus and your willingness to get rid of your excuses, because our excuses excuses compete for the leadership, the lordship, if you will, the mastery of our lives. And an excuse can become your king. An excuse can become your master. An excuse can become your boss, because that excuse begins to define for you what is possible for you, and it begins to define what you can do and what you cannot do. It defines how you can grow and how you'll never grow, what you can get through and what you can't get through, and what you'll never make it through. And the excuse begins to say, you shouldn't try that. Opportunity, that's not for you. You don't, no. You'll never be able to do that. Who are you? You can't forgive them. No one could forgive them after you'll never heal from that. You'll never get past that. You'll never grow through that. You can't help reacting that way. Don't talk to him. Don't walk up to her. Oh, no. You can't go to an event like that. Don't admit anything. Your attitude is not your fault. It's theirs. Come on now. The rest of the world needs to change. You don't need to change, and an excuse begins to define the future for you and define what is possible for you, and an excuse sets the ceiling for you on just how healthy and whole and noble and good and generous and loving and free that you can become. And that excuse can become your king, it can become your Lord, it can become your boss, and you can spend the rest of your life singing about King Jesus and serving and submitting to and obeying King Excuse. Now, do you want that? Do you want an excuse to be the Lord of your life? Do you want an excuse to be the boss of you? I don't, and I don't think you do either. I don't think you want to get to the end of your life and look back on things that could have been and probably should have been true and real and actual for you, the relationships you could and should have had with loved ones, with your kids, the freedom that you could have felt, the love and joy you could have experienced. I don't think you want to look back at the end of your life on what could and should have been, but never was, because you walled yourself in with paper walls of excuses. And if you call yourself a follower of Jesus, you actually can't do that. Now, there's a letter that's written by one of the early followers of Jesus. It's an anonymous letter. We're not actually sure who wrote it. There are a few theories. And when I call it a letter, it's actually more like a sermon or a speech that was then written down and carried to different groups of people and read aloud or even performed aloud for them. And this particular letter is written to Jewish background followers of Jesus, and it's called the letter to the Hebrews, or the letter to Jewish background Jesus followers, urging them not to use their very difficult trials and their extremely difficult circumstances as an excuse to retreat from the faith. And as we said last week, it was unbelievably costly. I mean, we can't really even imagine how costly it was in the first 3 centuries to become a follower of Jesus. And so he writes this letter, and towards the end of that letter, he says something that I think is a general principle. The letter is very much directed towards them, but it's a general principle that applies to all of us. And on the one hand, it's just a great way of thinking to enter a new year, but it also applies directly to this thing we've been talking about. And here's what he says in this letter, the letter of Hebrews. We're reaching the end of the letter, and here's what he says. So he says, let us throw off everything that hinders. Let us just throw off everything that hinders. Now, the picture he's painting in this last part of the letter is a really common picture of a group of runners who are running a race. And if you're competing in a race, if you're like competing as a runner, like in a marathon or a sprint, like you want to be lean and mean. I mean, you want to be stripped down. And it's like in any marathon, okay, all right, there are always people running who are looking like this. You know, you got your minions, you got your, I don't know, Ninja Turtles or Tigger or what, like, you got people who dress up in costume. That's fun, that's cute. They're just having a good time. They're not trying to win the race, right? But the ones who are competing to win, oh no. They are stripped down. They are lightweight. There is nothing extra. There is nothing weighing them down. They are all business. And that's the picture he's getting into our heads. Like anything that gets in your way, anything that's weighing you down or hindering you, you need to throw that off. You need to discard or get rid of that. And then he says the same thing in a parallel way that clarifies what the first thing he said means, like a second line that says, here's what I mean by that. And he says, the sin that so easily entangles. Now, this word sin over time became a religious word. And as it became more and more of a religious word, it was really stripped of its original, very non-religious meaning. As the writer of Hebrews is using this term, it is not a religious term at all in his world at the time. And it originally meant to miss the mark or to blow it or to fail in some way. And as a noun, it just referred to everything that just missed the mark or was messed up or just not the way it was supposed to be. And that's what sin is. In fact, when the writers of scriptures talk about sin, what they're really referring to is everything that is messed up with the world and everything that's messed up with me. It's everything. Everything that's not quite the way it should be or could be, everything that's messed up with the world. And there is a lot that is messed up with the world. There is layers and layers and layers of what's just not the way it could be and should be. And there is a lot that is messed up with me. And behind many of the things that are messed up with me, especially the things that remain messed up with me year after year and end up messing up things around me, are the excuses that I've made up to explain them away and to justify them all, which is messed up, isn't it? Like, I've got messed up stuff in me, and then I tell myself a story to make sense of it. That's messed up, and it gets all entangled. I think that's such a great word. What an accurate image. It's like it gets all entangled up in me and all entangled around me so that I can't even quite tell the difference between me and it anymore. It's messed up, and it's the sin that so easily entangles, including the excuses I create to explain away and justify them. And so he says, and this is just great advice, regardless of where you're at in your spiritual journey or how, like what you believe or used to believe, or this is just great advice. He's like, throw that off. Seriously, right? I mean, come on. The things that are messed up about you and then the lies you tell yourself to make it okay, like, that's just messed up. Like, throw that off. Everything that hinders, the sin, what's messed up about us that so easily entangles. And then he says, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. So why go through maybe I like the stuff that entangles me. Like maybe I like all these things weighing me down. Why do I need to get rid of it? Because there's a race before you. And that race is a picture of your life. There is a race before you. There is your life before you. And more than that, he says, there is a race marked out for you. The race that's marked out for you. And followers of Jesus and people who call themselves Christians, they believe something that maybe you've heard people say before. It's like, yeah, I've heard them say that. I've heard that phrase before. But people who call themselves Christians believe that there is a God who created you. A God who actually created you and has a plan for your life. You ever hear that language before? And that's what followers of Jesus believe, that God has a plan for my life. That there is a you that you are created to become. There is a you that you are created to become. You are created in the image of God. Every single human being created in the image of God, yes, marred with imperfections and fallen and broken for sure, but at your core, the true you is glorious and noble and capable and good and true, efficacious. I love that word. Capable, efficacious, and generous, and loving, like reflecting the very heart and character of God himself. Whatever else is true about you now, that is actually what's most true about you. That is the you that you were created to be. And there is a race that's marked out just for you. And the writer is saying, don't miss out on that. Don't miss out on becoming the person you were created to be, the truly best possible version of yourself. Don't miss your own race. Don't miss your own race, the race of your life, and don't lose your own race and sabotage your own race on purpose. Get rid of everything that weighs you down and trips you up and keeps you from running with perseverance, the race marked out for you. And then he says, and fixing our eyes on Jesus. Now, if you're not a follower of Jesus, here's what you need to know. Whatever you fix your eyes on, that is the direction you move. That's kind of a general principle. And you've noticed this even when you're driving. Have you ever noticed, like, if you start staring off to the side, like the billboards as you're driving down a country road, you ever notice yourself start to drift in that direction? It's just a general truism, like where you fix your eyes is the direction you move. And so this is just something to think about. Like if you are running a race, you really need to be focused ahead. And if you're not a follower of Jesus, you get to think about like, so what does that mean for me? That if you're a follower of Jesus, what he says is so powerful and so meaningful. Here's what he says: fixing our eyes. Fixing our eyes, not on our excuses, not on our because, not on our fears, not on not on our lack of opportunity or our lack of resources or the failures of our past or the circumstances all around us, and certainly not fixing our eyes on other people and their race. Hello. He says, fixing our eyes on who? Jesus. Fix it. That's who is in front of us. That's who we're following, and that's where our eyes are just zeroed in. And then he refers to Jesus in a couple of really powerful ways. First, he says, fix your eyes on Jesus, who is the pioneer and perfecter of faith, the one who begins it and the one who completes it, the one who blazed the trail of faith and the one who brings it all together and brings it to fruition, the one who perfects faith. And as he talks about the perfection of our faith, he's not talking about the perfection of our, like the content of our faith, like our ideas and the things we believe, and I know I believe and that's my faith. He's talking about our active faith. That is our courage, our confidence to actually follow Jesus, to really trust God, our faithful allegiance to him. He is the one who is perfecting that within us. And then he says this: if you've ever thought your circumstances were difficult enough to excuse you from needing to grow or having to grow, if you've ever thought your circumstances were difficult enough to totally excuse you from running the race, I got a doctor's note, here's my excuse, I don't have to run the race of my life. Here's what he says about the Jesus that we are fixing our eyes on, who, for the joy set before him. Marinate on this for just a second. Fix your eyes on Jesus, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, endured a Roman crucifixion, something much more than a paper wall. This is not a paper wall. This is a like pain and shame and like, no excuses, no excuses. I've got joy set before me. Endured the cross. I love this. Scorning the shame. There was nothing as shameful in the ancient world as a Roman crucifixion. Endured the cross, scorned its shame, and on the other side of that, sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. He says, that's who you got your eyes fixed on. That's who you actually follow. That's what and who you are running straight towards. Let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin, what's messed up that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Now, if you're not a God, faith, Bible, Jesus person, there's some good advice in there, and like you get to work your way through, like, what does that mean for me as I'm heading into a new year? But if you call yourself a Christian, there is a correlation between your ability to, not necessarily your willingness, because you got the willingness, but your ability to truly follow this Jesus, where he's going. There's a correlation between your ability to truly, truly follow Jesus and your willingness to push through your own paper walls and acknowledge your becauses as excuses. There is a correlation between our ability to run the race marked out for us with focus and endurance and our willingness to acknowledge and address and remove the things that hinder us, the things get entangled around us, and the excuses and the lies that we tell ourselves about why it's still in our lives. It is truly impossible to follow Jesus and continue to make excuses. It's impossible to truly follow Jesus and continue to make and believe our own excuses because Jesus will always lead us out of lies and into truth. You know that, right? In fact, we just sung that song. It's like there's no shadow he won't light up. There's no lie he won't tear down. This is what Jesus does. He's always leading us out of lies, including the lies we tell ourselves about ourselves, and into reality and into the truth. He is always leading us through these paper walls. This is what he will always do. And it is impossible to truly follow him and stay attached to our excuses and our paper walls. So, quick application as we're winding down week 1 of our series. An exercise that we've created for you. It's actually on the back of your notes. So if you're following along on the white sheet of paper in the program, you can flip it over. And I want to give you a second to think about this. It's also on the app, I believe, if you're following along on the app. 3 quick questions for you to think about. Here's an exercise for you. The first question is, in what areas of your life are you making excuses? Because you have some. I do. In what areas of your life can you consider the possibility that might actually be an excuse? And then I just give a bunch of examples. I don't know if this is you. Maybe it's your physical health. Like, I know. Or your emotional health. And you've got people who are telling you need to get off social media. Seriously, but I need it for my work and it's how I stay in touch. And it's like, what are you doing? Like, you need to, in what area of your life? Your financial life, your budget, your spending, your debt, my relationship with, fill in the blank. What name came to mind? Well, my relationship with, am I making excuses? Might I be making excuses about that relationship? My inability to forgive or to address or to heal or grow beyond, fill in the blank. My unwillingness, next one, my unwillingness to stop or start or change something. Are you making some excuses? My overreactions to a certain person. Well, it's because, and they did, and you don't know. My next step spiritually. Some of you have a next step spiritually and you know it. And you've known it for a while and you just keep making excuse after excuse after excuse. Or maybe it's with job or career or education or your living situation. These are just examples, but I want to give you a second to actually think about this. Like, get this seriously. Like, is there an area of my life? As I'm looking forward to some things I need to do this, I'm like, but, and it's more complicated than you think. What is that? What are some areas of your life where you might be making some excuses? And then the second question is, what are your excuses? What is that story you tell yourself? What is that thing you say when someone says, why don't you ever? Well, you should do this. Yeah, I know, but what are your excuses? How do you feel that in? How do you respond to that? What are your excuses? And the last question is simply, are you willing to leave them behind? Are you willing to throw them off and run with perseverance the race marked out for you, fixing your eyes on Jesus? Are you willing to do that? Because there are some things that really are worth carrying from one year to the next, and there are some things that are not. And we do, and our excuses are not. They are things that we need to leave behind. And if you choose to leave them behind, you will be free to grow. You will be free to actually follow Jesus where he wants to take you. You will be free to run the race that's marked out for you, and you will be better off. You will be better off in so many facets of your life. Your family will be better off. Your future family will be better off. Your dating relationships will be better off. Your marriage, if you're married, will be better off. Your friendships, your connection, your community will be better off. And if we were to all decide to leave our paper walls and our excuses behind, the world would be better off because we would be free to follow our Savior. So let's move through and let's move beyond our paper walls. And next week, we'll start the process of how to do that with part 2 of our series, Paper Walls, moving beyond the excuses that hold you back. Let me close this in prayer. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for loving us so much that you are willing to deal with anything in our life that holds us back. You love us just the way we are, and you love us way, way too much to leave us just the way you are. I thank you for the way you see us as what we can become. It's usually not the way we see ourselves, and so we just want to thank you for that. And I want to pray personally for me and for anyone else who's in with this, for your Holy Spirit, the Spirit of truth, to do what only you can do inside of us all, to light up any shadow that we're hiding in, to tear down any wall, any lie that we're telling ourselves and building up between ourselves and others, or between ourselves and the race you have marked out for us. I pray your Holy Spirit, your Spirit of truth, would come into my life, come into all of our lives, and expose what needs to be exposed in the way that only you can do, with the love and grace that only you can do it. And I pray for those of us who are like, yep, 2024, I'm going to deal with this. I'm going to move on. I'm going to address my excuses. I pray that you would give us the grace and the power and the courage to take steps forward in what we know you're calling us to do and to become. And I pray that in Jesus' name, amen. Well, hey, thanks so much for joining us here as we're kicking off this brand new series. I really do hope you'll come back and join us for part 2. As you're on your way out, just want to remind you of a couple things. Scott was telling you about those Connect cards and, of course, the Life Group brochures that we'd love to have you drop in the offering baskets on your way out. And then for anybody getting baptized or who wanted to come to the baptisms, I hope you heard Scott say, or if you came in late, maybe you missed, the venue has been changed. So if you show up in my house, my wife will give you the map and the directions to the place where it actually is. You would be better off getting the actual location, and it's on the information table. We've got some flyers. It's at Angela Bruggeman's house, our children's pastor. So that's where they're going to be, and at the same time, 2 p.m., I'm excited about that. I hope you'll join us for those celebrations. And then, of course, back next week for part 2 of our series, Paper Walls, moving beyond the excuses that hold you back. God bless you. Have a fantastic week breaking through your own paper walls. We'll see you back next weekend.